Ask the Podcast Coach for June 12th, 2021.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. I know summer doesn't officially start until like June 20th, but it's here. It's like it was 97 yesterday. We had heat warnings in Nebraska. Oh my gosh. So good time to be inside listening to Ask the Podcast Coach.
Yeah, it's it kind of kept teasing us like, hey, it's summer. No, it's not. With us, we keep having flash floods. I love when I'm like, I can't see like 3 inches over my hood and the radio comes on to let me know that I might be having a flash flood. I'm like, hey, thanks. Really helpful there. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, weather guy.
Yeah, but we always like to start off the show, get a little caffeine going. And, of course, that coffee pour is brought to you by our good friends over at podcastbranding.co. If you need a logo, if you need a whole artwork like for your podcast, or if you go, my website just looks like 1992 called, it's time to get that thing updated, and you want to go over to podcastbranding.co. That's where my buddy Mark, who is an award-winning graphic artist and podcaster, which, man, is that huge when you don't have to explain what a podcast is. And if you're like, branding, I don't know, it's just new to me, Mark can even do a full audit of your entire podcast, your website, your goals, everything like that. He can get you going in the right direction, because one of the things I hear most out of many, many podcasters is, I don't want to sound stupid, or I don't want to look stupid. And I've used Mark for Ask the Podcast Coach. I've used him for Podcast Rodeo Show. And he's also the guy that designed the School of Podcasting logo. So I know of what I speak when I say you're going to be proud of your logo when it comes across. So if you need any of that stuff, be sure to tell him that Dave and Jim sent you over at podcastbranding.co. And if you're watching live and askthepodcastcoach.com/live, or if you're in Clubhouse, you can either, if you're live, you can just type your comment in the chat. If you want to jump into the video, you want to join us here, we do ask that you have clothes on. That's always a good thing. But if you go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join, you can jump into the video and ask your question that way. And I was out, of course, scouring the Facebook groups, and I was like, oh, this is an oldie but a goodie. And this came from Kevin. I believe this was in the Podcast Movement Facebook group. When it comes to having a podcast player on your website, what do you guys love using? I see the popular ones use Simple Podcast Press and Pat Flynn's Smart Podcast Player. But here's the question I thought was interesting. Any great ones to start with that helps build traffic to your website and subscribers to your podcast? And that's what I was like, that's an interesting question, because it's one of those where you're like, that's not the right tool for what you're trying to do. If I'm trying to build traffic to my website, that's where you want to really think about a really good, headline or a title for your, and really to me, all a podcast is, it's a blog with a player on it. Really. So your show notes, your description is really just a blog post, and get that title in there. And then people don't read. I don't know if you realize this, but people have quit reading. I don't know when it happened, but they just quit reading. So when you use headings to break up your different topics, it allows them to skim, which is what they want to do. And then once they skim it, they will then figure out if I want to read it, or hopefully press play. And so that's not going to really, a player isn't going to drive traffic. And he also asked about subscribers. I don't know. To me, Jim, I don't know if I've looked at a player and go, oh, it's a great player, I got to subscribe to this. What causes you to subscribe?
Well, I want to, it's a great show. Like, I listened to it one time and I'm like, oh, I got to get this on a regular basis. I've even subscribed to shows where we've had great guests and they've just talked to, they've come on, asked a question, they've intrigued me, like their personality. I'm like, oh, you got a show? Okay, I'll go subscribe to it and give it, because unsubscribing is so easy. So I'm just going to subscribe to it so I make sure I get it. and then I'm going to give it a chance to listen. So Dave, I don't know. Like, remember when we went through that whole? It was like 3 years of players. That's
Yeah.
all. Like, how do I get? I think the question was, how do I get the SoundCloud player to look right? That was the thing, right? And I just don't. I don't think people are going on their desktop and clicking play. I just don't. I don't think that's happening.
The last time I tracked, it was somewhere between 3 and 5% of my traffic was actually on the website. And that's probably from a Google search or, somebody sharing it or whatever. But I was just like, this is one of those things that people obsess over. Now, granted, those players look pretty cool. And, we're talking about branding there. That's something maybe to think about. But on the other hand, I mean, I right now am listening to, somebody told me about it, and then I was telling other people about it. It's called Behind the Desk, the story of late night. Man, is that a good series. It's from CNN. It's like 6 episodes. I'm on episode 5, and it really does talk about how, if you think about it, Letterman was a guy that really just tried to break the mold of late night, and in the end ended up kind of doing the same format and they talk about how Johnny Carson was the guy that, there was Steve Allen. This is way before our time, who I didn't realize Steve Allen used to do a bunch of stunts. He was kind of like Letterman used to do the suit of seltzer and the suit of Velcro. That was actually a Steve Allen ripoff and things like that.
Float, I think was another one, right? Will It Float?
Yeah. And so that was stuff that, he was just trying to break the format. But I found out about that show from people telling me about it, and I've never been to their website. I went to Overcast. I found it. I hit play. I hit subscribe. I said download all. And so none of that has to do with, I think, the player. It has to do with the content and people telling me, oh, this is really good. You would love this. And when I get people, it's funny because somebody recommended it to me. I hadn't listened to it yet, but I talked about it on my show. And then I had a member of the School of Podcasting that said, man, thanks so much for that recommendation. That's an awesome show. And I was like, I haven't listened to it. So I listened to it yesterday.
The player, I think, even I think today you can even have just what would they call it? The 1 pixel player. It was just the play button, right? In Blueberry. I think you can get away with that. If you're pulling people in and they see the play button, they're going to click on it. There's lots of, and I use the Simple Podcast Player, and it's got all kinds of, there's some great stuff you can do with that, and find me here and do this and click on that and download.
Join my mail list and
And listen, if you want to do all that stuff, do it. I just think those numbers are fairly small for the return you're going to get on it. To your point though, if it's gonna like the player I use, really, I've kind of tuned it to match my brand, which is just a black and white kind of thing. So I like it for that. So get what you want, get what's comfortable, get something you're proud of and that you like, and then run with it. I just don't think it's going to make that big of a deal on numbers.
Yeah. The other thing that I don't know if this is a thing, but it's something we might want to keep our eye open for. And that is at Libsyn this week, I had more questions about stats than I have in a long time. And it was things, and typically it was they were going down. What's the deal? Is there something wrong kind of thing? And it dawned on me that, hey, there was a little bit of a weirdness with our stats when we went into COVID. I wonder if we're going to have a little weirdness coming out of COVID.
Yeah. Why wouldn't we?
Yeah. I because on one hand you go, well, people are going to start driving again. And I just read an article that kind of said, not so fast. Like, yeah, we're going to get more people driving, but they basically said what we've been saying is a lot of companies kind of said, hey, this work from home thing, we could save some money here. And we didn't seem to lose any productivity, huh? And so it'll be fun to watch. But if for some reason your numbers start going squirrely, that might be the case. And then
imagine you've been working from home for the last year and you lost your time to podcast. I did. I haven't had as much time to listen to podcasts. So now we're returning to the office. And by the way, I was reading a LinkedIn post today. We should probably we're returning. We're not really returning to work. We've been at work.
Yeah.
We're really returning to the office. Like that's kind of I think some people like, well, when we go back into work, and it's like, a lot of people been working from home. So like, let's say I like to say working from home and working from work. Like maybe that's the way to say it. But I think we've gotten out of the habit, and that thing, especially based on maybe the player that you use, may have stopped downloading, right? And so now your podcast is just sitting there dead in somebody's player. So I think you may have to do some things to re-energize, remind folks that, hey, go to your player and make sure, whatever. I don't know, that could be part of it too, is we just have a bunch of broken podcasts inside players.
Yeah, it should be interesting to watch. The other thing, I had somebody saying there's got to be just something wrong. My numbers have really gone down, and it doesn't really matter what side you're on, but realize if your show is about, Jim, give me a topic, any topic.
Knitting.
It is a knitting show, and you go on your Twitter and you start going either way, hard left, hard right, either it's all Trump all the time, or, Trump is whatever it is, or, anytime you start talking
left or right.
Yeah. What are the three things you're not supposed to talk about? Politics, religion, and I think abortion. Is that the top three?
Math. I think it's math.
Yeah, and math. Yeah, never do math live.
Don't talk about math.
and I just thought, and this person, I was looking and I was like, wow. And so I thought about that. And they had their, social buttons right there on their website, follow me here. And I thought I could see where a lot of people are like, oh, I like this knitting show. And then they click on it and they're like, I can't believe this person is doing this. And I was like, it's just something to think about. I don't know. I am weird in a way that I really don't care what your politics are. I do snicker at times because my ex-wife has gone way deep on one side, and I kind of look at it and go, I don't know. For some people that might affect your credibility. I could see that, but I just thought about that. I was like, well, I don't want to say that's one of the reasons why your downloads are down, but if I was looking for anything to go, let's consider this.
Yeah. Well, I think I was talking with a guy yesterday, and I think coming out of this pandemic, I'm hearing this term, we're all stressed out. And I was like, okay, what are we stressed out about? Like, there's more money in the okay, I'm primarily in the United States here.
Right.
More money in the economy than we've ever had. We're seeing inflation because of it, right? There's jobs everywhere. Like everybody's looking for a job, right? We're returning to the office, right? In some cases. And so it looks like things, and I was thinking, why are we all stressed out? And I don't know if being stressed out is the right word. Maybe we all are suffering a little PTSD from the last year, right? We're coming off of this, and I think we're all still a little shaken from it. Regardless of where you land on the political spectrum, I mean, Dave, it has been a year. And I just think the other thing I'm hearing more and more from people is I've stopped listening to news. Like, they're so turned off by the edutainment news cycle, crazy kind of things. They've kind of quit. They've kind of completely disengaged from the news cycle. I kind of wonder if that has to do with podcasting too. Like, if you're political and you're seeing your numbers drop, it may be people just don't want anything political at this point, and they're suffering a little
backlash, could be
right, from that. And so I think when I hear I'm stressed out, I'm kind of wondering, it's like, wow, how do we help people recover from the last just year of psychological trauma? Yeah.
Well, Kyle, we got some chat room stuff. Kyle is saying the listener behavior is about to change as people's routines. That's the thing. Our routine is changing, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then Dave said, did you see the thing about Apple and a few other tech companies want them to go back to the office at least 3 days a week by September? And a lot of employees are like, I don't want to go back. But the thing, going back to Kyle's point, we're out of practice. And this week I drove to Cleveland. I actually bought, my goal is to be just like Jim. So I went out and bought some exercise equipment, and on Facebook, whatever it is, Marketplace. And I bought a rowing machine, and I drove to Cleveland, literally in my old neighborhood, to pick it up. And I was amazed at just how I felt a little bit like the 17-year-old when you get on the freeway and you're like, there's all these cars going fast. And I was like, I haven't done this in a long time. And there are actual cars on it. And then when you get towards Cleveland, there's a spot where, like, if you're not in the middle lane when you go to get on, like, you are screwed. And I was like, oh no, I forgot to get in the middle lane. And I'm like, I needed the kindness of somebody to let me in. So, and then the other thing at my church, we just went back 2 weeks ago, and the CD player was like, I don't think so. So we're trying to play music, and all of a sudden it's like, amazing girl. It's like, nope, sorry. And what happened is we just basically, the one guy took a can of air and just blew into the CD player. He's like, this thing's been sitting here for a year and a half and it hasn't been used. He goes, let's just use it. And so he was mowing the lawn, it's a 5 CD changer, just put on, let it play, and it's working fine. But he was like, I think it was just like dusty.
It was just unused.
Yeah. So we might have a case where as we transition, it's just a change. Anytime you do any change, it's stressful.
Yeah, and we're not going to go back. It's not going to go back to exactly the way it was.
No.
Even in the podcast space, I think it's gonna morph and look a little bit different as people adapt to this, whatever this becomes. Whether we go back into the office on a full-time basis, or we have this part-time, or we've got this hybrid model, or whatever, people's schedules will change and then they'll adapt. I think this would be a great time for podcasters to probably survey their audience and be like, hey, okay, tell me a little bit about what's going on with you. What kind of topics are you liking? What are you not liking? It's tough in a survey at this point in time. The ones that haven't liked what you've been doing have already left. They're gone. So you're not going to get a lot of that kind of feedback. But
Tom Webster just put out an episode of, I think it's called Things I Hear. I forget. But he was talking about he uses the analogy of a restaurant. And you kind of do a little pizza, you do a little this, and he goes, the problem is, like, you think people love your salads, and he goes, people don't love your salads. They just want pizza or burgers. And you double down on the salads, and the problem is your salad. And it's this whole thing about how what happens is you then start asking the people, like, what do you want? And the people that are eating salads are like, more salads. He's like, but the problem is the people that you wanted to stay have already left because it's like, so it's a really interesting concept. I was like, so sometimes we wait a little too long to throw out that listener survey, and the only people that are left are the people that I just want this little,
super fans. And they actually drive you in a direction of more, getting deeper into the niche, and you get less relevant to the others. So look, I work for a survey company. I'm a big guy on surveys who should be doing it, but you got to be. I think you have to be careful about of listening to that feedback, and making sure you know what you're doing with it. If you're chasing audience feedback all the time, you're going to be, you're just going to be flailing in a flailing world of constant change, and then you could drive more people away with that. So do surveys, know what your audience thinks, be careful. Don't listen to every negative. Don't listen to every positive. You really have to take into account, like, what am I trying to do here? I think at the end of the day, you got to make a show that you like doing. Like if you bow down too much to your audience and then you start hating what you're doing, you just stop doing it. So I always say, make the show for you. Like Home Gadget Geeks is a perfect example of, there's plenty of tech shows, I'm not the most popular, nor is it the best, nor do we stay on topic. We spend the first 10 minutes talking about the weather. I mean, it's not that great for a lot of people, but it's created. I love it. It's me. It's what I want. And if you want to come along and listen, that's awesome. Right. And so that way, that's how I've gotten to 500. That's how you get, Dave, you and I love doing the show, and somehow we've gotten to 350. Or we're close. We're a couple weeks away.
347, but who's counting?
But we're close, right? And you're like, I love showing up every Saturday morning. We just keep, and apparently you do too, because you haven't said, yeah, I'm done with this.
That is true. It's funny. I just realized that, have you ever maybe not, maybe it's a Dave thing, but I just realized I haven't published an episode of the podcast Rodeo show in about a month. I just quit, not on purpose. It was like, I need to get to that. And then all of a sudden it was like, it's Thursday. Do I put it out late or just wait a couple days and put out an episode early? And it was like, and then I didn't make a decision. And consequently, oops, now we're 2 weeks I haven't published an episode. And it's one of those shows that is starting to lose the goal. So this goes back to your why. Why did I start that show? One, I wanted to test a media host. Number two, I thought I could use it as a loss leader. Like, hey, if you liked me reviewing the first 5 minutes of your show, you can go over to Podcast Review Show and get your whole podcast reviewed and your website, and you get another point of view from Eric K. Johnson. And I think in the, 2 years I've done that show, we've had 2 people do that. So it's not really successful at doing what it does. And I started doing these as video. Why? I don't know. But I did, and that made it take up more time. And all of a sudden, boy, more time and less result equals, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And so I'm not sure that's one of the things on my list of things to chew on today is, what am I going to do with that show? It is fun. It got a lot of buzz when it first started off because I was just being honest. But it's one that was like, you know what? Because part of it is I was listening to my interview on Monday for the School of Podcasting is Joe Salcy-High from Stacking Benjamin. So this is a guy that just has the drive to constantly get better. And he's now on Westwood One, not too shabby. Wow. And he started a second show. And one of the guys at Westwood One said, what you doing? Why are you diverting your energy and time and focus on making a really, really small show, less smaller? He goes, but it's still going to be puny when you could be taking all your energy and making Stacking Benjamins. And I was like, boy, that's a really, that one kind of hit home. I was like, Yeah. So
yeah. Well, the diversification, it's good. It can be, but he has once you reach, I think, that level, if you're on Westwood One or if you were Spotify sponsored, right? I think I've struggled with this as well. We've got all these podcasts at Gallup, and I spend a lot of time on that in the community. I do this with you, and I do Home Gadget Geeks. Those are kind of the primary things that I do now. And that question, I often think, okay, I have to really make sure that the 2 shows that I do outside of the Gallup network aren't seen as a distraction. Like this, this is my entertainment. Like, this is my fun time. This is what I do to relax and have a good time. But if I was all of a sudden, say, you and I were getting together and I was talking about Myers-Briggs all the time, or I was, bringing in an Enneagram and we were having these conversations, my friends at Gallup may be like, what are you doing there? Like, what's the purpose of that thing?
Yeah.
And so I think you have to be careful how you're spreading yourself across these multiple priorities. And if you had a flagship hit like that, why would you start run with that thing till it's done? There's plenty of time in life to start another podcast. Run on the horse that brought you. Is that a great analogy?
It's close enough.
The cat
dance with the horse that is something
in the water. I don't know.
but I also thought about it. I was like, there are cool ways I could speed up the podcast rodeo show, like lose the video unless you're paying me for it, kind of thing, and things of that nature. But it was funny because I'm not being consistent. And one of the things I wanted to bring up today is a lot of people get really, really hung up on consistent. And I think they're more focused on consistent schedule and not consistent value, for lack of a better phrase. And there's a show, is the key point there. It was written or created by the person that created Grey's Anatomy, who I forget what her name is, but she's like, everything she touches turns to gold. It had Katie Seagal, who you've seen in Married with Children, so a great actress. And there's another guy that when you see the guy in it, you're going to go, oh, it's that dude. He's in everything. And after 4 episodes, it got canceled. Now they ran the other 6, but I was like, hey, that show was consistently on the same time every week. It was a consistent schedule, and yet it got canceled. So having a consistent schedule is not that's not the key to getting people. And they said, I kind of did some research this morning, and they were hoping to get a certain demographic, a slightly younger demographic, because, let's get the social warriors kind of pumped up with the kind of, it's based on Erin Brockovich or however you say her name, that was always out and fighting these big companies and things like that. And it just didn't do what they thought it was going to do. And then they also checked, which was interesting. They checked the TV ratings, but they also checked apparently, YouTube TV and all the places where you can stream it later. And they just kind of went, yeah, this is not getting the traction. And they gave it a big push. There was a lot of stuff. Katie Seagal is rebel,
Right.
And I watched a couple episodes and was like, I'm not buying it. I just, it was one of those things where when you have to really stretch me, like she's just going to walk into this giant fundraiser and nobody's going to stop her. And she's got a bunch of people with signs. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen in reality. And I was like, now, if this was a superhero movie, absolutely. You just suspend reality at the door. But this one, I was like, I don't think so. Shonda Rhimes, yes, is the person that created Grey's Anatomy and the person behind Rebels. So
you don't like. We see this in Hollywood all the time. You get a great director, you get a couple great actors, you get money behind it, you get Waterworld, right? I mean, you get some nobodies and people who've never done anything before, and you get Napoleon Dynamite, right? And it works both ways. Like, I think there's some times where you think that, oh, this should be a big hit, and it's not, and then some things that just surprise us. And you got to be doing this. You got to just keep doing this. Chances are, if you create, and I'm gonna actually maybe go back on what I said just a few minutes ago. If you create one podcast and it's not a hit, then you're like, well, there was my one chance. Well, no, actually, no. You got more chances to try other things, right, with this. And so whether it's another podcast or fixing your current podcast or changing your current podcast or whatever you're doing, there's always time to try different things in this, because you never know when it's going to be a hit. I can't imagine the amount of people who moved to LA to start a movie career who just never did, right? There's plenty of stories of those who did, right? Plenty, but those percentages are so small compared to the millions who just never. And so I'm, doing something different.
I have a member of the School of Podcasting that's an actor in New York. And as you might imagine, COVID, not really very friendly when it comes to being an actor. And I asked him, I said, I don't think I could be an actor. I said, I don't think I could handle being told no over and oh. And he said, dude, you have to knock on, he goes, you just have to do your best. If you didn't get the part, it was a great practice at handling your nerves in a tense situation and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, and in the meantime, you do the odd jobs. He actually he's a stand-in for Jimmy Fallon. So when they need to work on the lighting and stuff and Jimmy's not there, he goes in and stands in Jimmy's place. And he's like, he goes, you got to do what you got to do. He's all about theater, super talented guy. I was like, holy cow. But you do what you got to do. And some people wouldn't do that. I'm an actor. I'm a thespian or whatever. And it's like, no, I'm willing to. And he said a lot of people are waiting tables. And he goes, the problem was in the acting world, waiting tables kind of went away because the restaurants went away. He goes, so it was really, really tough. But you got to, like you said, you got to find what you want to do. And Randy in the chat room has a great point here. He says, do more of what works after you stop doing what doesn't. Of course, that's the key. He goes, is figuring out, and then two, the willingness to do it, mainly letting go. I've been reading that book, Tarzan Economics, and that's all about letting go of stuff that's not working and grabbing the new stuff. So
it's hard though, because what works today may not work tomorrow, and what you're doing today may be what works tomorrow, but you quit too soon. But
that's it.
You didn't know it. God, I think about all that. I'm a big Microsoft enthusiast.
Yeah.
And I think about all the hits that Microsoft could have had, but they were.
Jim, are you talking about Microsoft?
I was talking about Microsoft.
Oh, hold on. Before we do that, this was sent in by a listener. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only Jim Collison.
Nerd jingle. He's a nerd. He's a nerd.
Nerds! Nerd! Nerd! Turn to the nerds. Nerds! Nerds!
This is what Joe Rogan did.
You're not Joe Rogan.
It's time for Jim to nerd out. I don't know, Jim, what do you think? Baba Booey, Baba Howard Stern's penis.
Dave, this is a great question.
Okay. Back to Microsoft.
What did you say about Howard Stern?
I don't know. I don't remember.
I love when I said, don't be Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Oh, so as a Microsoft enthusiast, I've watched them a lot be way too early on things. They were doing kind of tablets years before the iPad came out, right?
Yeah.
They had this home server product that just was way too early, right? I mean, now they had their phone probably wasn't too early, but they've had these products way too early, and they haven't had success, and they quit too soon, or they didn't have the right marketing, or they went in the right place at the right time, or some of those kinds of things. So you just have to, I think you just have to keep I can guarantee you this: if you stop podcasting, you'll never have a hit. I can guarantee that.
That's it
right now.
Or they have an iPod that looks like a 1970 station wagon. That was my favorite.
Some wood paneling on the side.
It's like, what marketing person said, I know, let's add wood paneling to it. They said, yeah.
Chuck that thing. Yeah, hit somebody with it and hurt them.
We're bringing wood paneling back. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, that may come back. You never know.
You never know. Well, you know what never goes out of style?
Our awesome supporters.
And you can find these people by going over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And we always want to thank the teacher's pet. That, of course, is James over at the Dog Podcast Network. Find that at dogpodcastnetwork.com. If you have a little hound, and man, I was at the park last night, saw a guy I had not seen in like 15 years. He had a Newfoundland. Have you ever seen a Newfoundland? This was a puppy. It was literally like 4 feet tall. It was wow. I do not want to have to clean up after that thing, because I was like, holy cow. But if you need something to listen to while you're walking around with your pooch, go check out Dog Edition at dogpodcastnetwork.com. There are many other shows over there too. So if you like dogs and you need a long show, they got it. You need a short show, they got it. Everything dogs is over there at Dog Podcast Network, and you can even win $5,000 in a contest that they're running. But our $20 supporters, Ed Sullivan over at soniccupcake.com, he can make you sound great. And Brock over at Occupied Podcast. So if you're into occupational therapy, check it out, occupiedpodcast.com. Kim over at Toastmasters101.net. So if you're trying to improve your content, develop your voice, it's all there, Toastmasters101.net. Max Trescott over at aviationnewstalk.com. Jim, we were talking about this last week. You got to chat with, is he not like the nicest dude on the planet?
Incredible. I mean, he was just, and a listener, like he was making fun of some of the things that I've said, and I'm like, oh, you obviously listened to the show. So, just really a great conversation.
Yep. And Felix over at the Latin Podcast Awards. If you are looking for podcasts with a Latin flavor, it's part of the Audio Dice Network. You can find it at latinpodcastawards.com. Shane over at spybrary.com. So if you're into, every time I think of Shane and spies, the first thing that comes to my mind is Mad Magazine Spy versus Spy for some reason. I think he's more into like James Bond and, some of that stuff, but for some reason, that always hits me in the face. Glenn the Geek Hebert out at horseradionetwork.com. I can't wait to hear the stories. Glenn is out on the road. He took his truck, hooked it up to a trailer, and he said there's nothing more fun than trying to get good internet when you're out in the middle of like a cornfield. It's like, so I can't wait to hear the stories when he gets back. Greg over at debtshepherd.com, who will be on the School of Podcasting shortly. He's over there teaching financial wellness. And Greg over at the Indie Drop-In Network, if you've got a scary show, a true crime show, a comedy show, he's got an audience that would like to hear your episodes. You can basically send your episode over to indiedropin.com and they'll put it in front of their audience. It's a great way to grow your show. Michael in the chat room at Baby Mountain Radio Productions, where podcasting and hard work are made fun. Check him out, babymountainradio.com. And again, if you'd like to be an awesome supporter or see our other supporters, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And there are all sorts of ways that you can support the show. You can sponsor Jim's mug. You can buy my book. You can donate once. It's all there at askthepodcastcoach.com/store. So thanks to all of our awesome supporters. We do deeply appreciate that.
Can you support me on a pour, by the way?
I can support you on... Yeah, we can't have you being thirsty. It's
not a good time to get decaffeinated.
It's not good. Let's see here.
Before you go forward, Ed Sullivan, who at Sonic Cupcake, right?
Yeah.
Ed is Ed and I have been talking. I think later next year, they're doing a trip. The Cigar Authority guys are doing a trip to Nicaragua. And I
Wow.
think they're going down to, that's cigar country. Right?
Yeah.
And I think they're going to try and do a live Cigar Authority from Nicaragua. And so we've been talking, he and I have been talking about equipment, what he's going to do. I mean, he is a big equipment nerd, even more than you, Dave. I mean, that guy's got everything. It's super great. If you ever need anything tested, just contact Ed because he's probably got it, right? But it'll be interesting to see, right now, what's holding him back. The equipment's not. We have plenty. I mean, taking down equipment or using portable equipment, that's the easy part. Does the internet exist down there? Does he have the right bandwidth to be able to do this? Are they going to have, he's going into a spot where, you really don't want to do that over Wi-Fi. Can he plug in? How's that going to work? That's kind of the difficulty in doing live programs. COVID kind of stopped all of that. Like I remember, 2 years ago, we were talking about broadcasting live from all kinds of places. That has almost completely stopped. But as things come back, it'll be interesting to follow him and see how he does in, going down, basically doing a live show from Nicaragua. So it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. Dave has that same point. It's like internet's going to be fun. And in some cases, electricity, you kind of forget, I was listening to Podland and they were talking about parts of Africa where they have the internet, but bandwidth is like just ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the podcasting 2.0, podcastindex.org, I believe is the website. I think they just put into place where, and I look at this and go, great idea. Don't want to do it. And that is have I could, typically I export a show at 128 stereo. I could go down to like 37, mono, like super low bit. But for people that are getting, having charged an arm and a leg to download that, and there's some sort of phone, there's a whole bunch of like super low bandwidth stuff. And that's where I sound, what's the word? Insensitive. That I just go, you know what? I'm glad I don't live there. B, I wish them well, but C, you're not my target audience. Like if you don't have the internet, you're probably not going to be starting a podcast anytime soon. It's like, so.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think, you don't have to go to Nicaragua for it to be a challenge. It could be in Valentine, Nebraska. Right. And like you're out in the middle. They are literally out in the middle of nowhere up there in Valentine. So far out that's where all the stargazers go. They have an annual stargazer conference that they go out for a week and everybody brings their telescopes because it's so dark out there, right? There isn't anything for miles. You know how I know that? I've had that guy on my podcast that talks about it. But so even in the United States, we have challenges with that. And so I think we're Starlink. Oh my God, I'm getting so nerdy.
Hold on.
Okay.
And now it's time for Jim to get his nerd on.
All right. You mentioned Starlink.
I think our friend Elon Musk and Starlink system that's going up, right? That's this. You can watch he launches a new rocket like every week for Starlink. That will kind of blanket the earth for internet access. I think it will have a big effect on rural and third world access to the internet. So this could be something, Dave, we may see a big change in the next, like imagine Ed's situation. Imagine you're going to Nicaragua or Valentine, Nebraska, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to get internet there. Imagine being able to buy a Starlink hub that you could pretty much from anywhere get pretty good bandwidth. And just just put that thing, connect to it and do your stuff. That could change the way for both internet access and the way we broadcast live. Elon is now using Starlink to actually, like the cameras on these rockets when they launch.
Right.
For the last couple of years, they've been terrible. They cut out. Well, yeah,
right.
It's going to space, right? I mean, it's going to space.
The GoPro didn't make it.
I watched one of these the other day, take off to landing, crystal clear, because he's using his own Starlink system to to stream this stuff. So pretty cool, and may have an impact on our ability for people to access our stuff here in the future. So pretty cool.
The other thing, and I feel bad saying this because it's something about the industry that I was like, but I was kind of like, and I don't know if this used to be an email and I don't get it anymore or what, but do you remember Podcast Magazine?
No. Mm-mm.
You don't, this started, I'm going to say probably a year and a half ago. I think it was at Podcast Movement, and it's still going on. And
the print one that was going to be,
it was going to be print, which you can still order, but I thought there was like an email, or maybe it was free for the first year. Maybe that's it. It's not free anymore. It's like $8 a month if you want the digital version, but there's a Hot 50. So if you would like to vote for the Ask the Podcast Coach, or, School of Podcasting, or Home Gadget Geeks, go to podcastmagazine.com/hot50.
I thought they were talking about us, Hot and 50.
50, that's it. What more do you want? Exactly. No, I don't think that's Hot 50, whereas the 50 is how much weight do you need to lose?
That's what I thought. I thought you were going, we were in the Hot 50, but apparently. Yeah, I like your second. I think we probably got 50 to lose.
Yeah. Also, I should mention, if you're watching live, you can jump in at askthepodcastcoach.com/join, or just type your question into the text there. If you're listening on Clubhouse, feel free to raise your hand and we will bring you on stage and you can ask your question that way. And then, have you ever had an idea and then you don't do it? And then, I don't know, 7 months later, you go, somebody took my idea.
All the time.
Yeah, I just saw this and was like, here's the thing. And they choiced it. And I was like, that's what I should have done. In fact, I've talked to Eric about doing this, taking the podcast review show and turning it into a membership site instead of like, hey, come and we'll review it once. Let's create this reoccurring income and we will just both kind of counsel you. But I've never heard of this, and it's got some people. I've heard of one of the reviewers, but it's timber.fm. It's $20 a month. And once a month, therefore, experts will listen to your show and give you feedback. And I'll be interested to see if this goes, because I'm not 100% sold on the fact that people want feedback on their podcast. That's one I sometimes kind of go. I had somebody who's in marketing this week, and she emailed me and said, hey, we've met an event. Can I ask you a question? Can I pick your brain kind of thing? And she was, we all want to grow our audience. And I said, have you gotten any kind of feedback? Have you, done any kind of focus group or had people, and the answer was no. And I was like, well, you're in marketing. You should probably, and she's like, well, I get great reviews. And I was like, yeah, but people that love your show are going to leave a review. Right. It's either 5-star or 1-star. And I'm like, so I'll be interested to see if this works, because I don't know if I'm sold on podcasters want feedback.
It does go beyond the survey. And there's a product somebody should create. Just call it Beyond the Survey, where when your survey gets too biased, like your listeners are biased because they continue to listen and they like you. So you're not getting any negative reviews. Dave, this may be a really good way for $20 to get some honest feedback to get beyond your survey, because you're not going to get it in most cases. You're not going to get it. So this would be a great idea for $20. That's not, it's not a bad way of getting some, but to your point, God, it's really hard to pay for it and then just get blasted. You're like, what am I? It's a product that, man, they're going to have to really work hard for this thing to work, because it just goes against our human nature.
Yeah. And they have like 4 people that are reviewing it, and they're all either in media or have worked in podcasting. And I thought, okay, $20 a month. That means if you get one review, that's $5 a person, like, that's doing the review. And I'm like, now we're down to the podcast Rodeo show, me on Fiverr. And I was like, so they're going to have to do some volume for that to be, worth their while. It'll be interesting to see. And plus they say that, Randy says, I'd listen to a podcast review show. It was hosted by Triumph, the insult comic dog. I cannot do. I'd have to go listen to Triumph, but That would be interesting. But I'll be interested to see again if this, if it expands into something else. Maybe they're doing that as a loss leader, join for $20 a month, and then for one-on-one consulting, you do that. It sounds like a paid mastermind group. Yeah, and that's the thing that was interesting. I actually did some market research. I asked a bunch of people. I'm like, hey, what would a podcast mastermind look like for you? And I go, here's my idea. We could all maybe once a month or once a week have, like, we'll pick somebody's show. Like, when you sign up, give me an episode, and once a week or every 4 days or so, you can listen to a podcast, or at least part of it. And I had one person that said, wait, so I have to listen to more podcasts? And they just either A, and this is probably a big part of it, I didn't have a clear focus of the benefit of this, or I wasn't explaining what I thought it could be, but I didn't get anybody going, where do I sign up? And that to me is, you want somebody going, take my money. I want that now. And I didn't get that, so I didn't do it. But I still want to do it. I still, to this day, like, this could be. And that's why right now, if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/question, my secret question that's just between you and me is, if you were building a podcast, some sort of community, because we all know the bad ones, like, what's a good one look like? What would you want to do? What would you want to be able to see or do or whatever? And I just used the analogy of the first time I went to Guitar Center, and I walked in and I was like, oh, it's just like angels. I was like, oh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So, but hey, in Clubhouse, Rich has got his hand raised. So we're going to bring Rich up to the stage, I believe. Invite to speak. There it is. So, Rich, thanks for coming on the show. What can we help you with?
Thanks, Dave. I apologize. I'm very, very nervous. I am a huge fan of you and your show.
Well, thank you.
I love it. I've been listening to it for, oh my gosh, I think it's been about 1.5 years now. I don't miss an episode. And I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't launched my podcast yet, but I will be starting my recordings starting this afternoon. So nice. I'm doing the recording process this afternoon for my first one. Based on everything I've learned, I need to have about kind of like an introductory show, kind of the opposite of a trailer. Not sure what y'all call that. And then maybe 3 episodes before I actually launch. That seems to be what I'm hearing.
That seems to be a common thing. Yeah. And my whole thing is, remember, just because you recorded it doesn't mean you have to release it.
Good point. Yeah, I have a feeling I'll be practicing a lot this weekend longer than this weekend before I get it right. But yeah. I'm certainly going to not delay and try to post. But here's my question. First, man, I'm so glad you're on Clubhouse. But my question is, I'm starting to see podcasters with, say, 30-minute to an hour podcast, in terms of size. Duration. I'm starting to see them now do these like 8 to 10 minute, shorter episodes. I guess I just call them shorts or briefs. And I'm noticing that they're mixing those in to the same, show, or like, if I go to like Overcast and I go and I look at, the different episodes, I know I'm saying, well, there's the 40-minute, regular episode, and then here's a 5 to 10 minute short, and they're kind of interspersed. And for me, I looked at that and I was like, man, this is really inconvenient for me as a listener, because I want to hear the long version. I don't want to hear the 5 minutes nuts and bolts. I got a lot of drive time, so that's my preference. But am I the only one who feels like, golly, why is all this stuff mixed together? And if I end up doing any shorts, should I be mixing those into the same show, or do I need to be creating a separate show for those shorts so that people don't get frustrated because they want a long version versus a short? Yeah, that's my question.
Thanks, Rich. I think Jim, I'll let you go first, but we're all shaking our head going, eeh.
Well, yeah, I'm not a big fan of mixing that content together. Some of the shorter content is being heavily influenced by YouTube, right? I mean, because the YouTube audience, in theory, wants this somewhere between 10 and 20-minute content to be successful. And they've got a formula over there, and everybody's kind of chasing the formula. And, there's probably some truth to it in that sense. So from a pure podcast feed perspective, I think you try to keep similar content in a similar feed. And if all of a sudden, I had an hour, like you're saying, maybe you have a podcast that's an hour that you're used to an hour, and that's your habit, and you have it on a drive. And then all of a sudden these little 10-minute ones start showing up. Look, Mike Rowe did this, and it's driving me freaking crazy, right? He went from a 15-minute to an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my thing.
Yeah.
I used Mike Rowe. He was my shower podcast because it was short. And I don't know about you, when I get in the shower, I don't want to come back out. And so when his show was over, I was like, crap, it's been at least 10 minutes. I know I'm clean. Get out of the shower. And when he went to an hour, I'm like, look, I'm not that dirty. I don't need an hour in the shower. But
I miss Mike for a month, and I'd come back and, there'd be 7 or 8 there, and I could blow through them in an hour. Now they're an hour. I get 8. I'm 8 hours behind on Mike Rowe, right? And not that that's bad, but my expectation as a listener were that these were what did he used to say? Something short for the short attention span or something.
Yeah,
something. He had this slogan. Well, he totally blew out his slogan. What I thought he should have done was just create a new channel and say,
Yep.
hey, I'm doing long form. This is going to stay short form. And if you want to subscribe to the long form, come over here and get it done. That's what I would have preferred.
And Jim, do you know why he changed? Do you remember?
No.
Oh, there was an episode he talked about. Guess what he looked at?
Audience feedback?
No, Joe Rogan. And he was like, Joe gets to have these in-depth conversations that are super long. And I was like, crap.
Don't be Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Don't be Joe Rogan.
Yeah. And I was like, crap. Yeah. He's, he's doing dirty jobs again. I was like, holy cow, give me a break. So to have his own, create a new feed. Like, just, that's fine. Yeah. And and I think about James. James has, the dog edition. Its length is designed for like whatever, a 15, 20-minute walk. And if it was all of a sudden 5, people are like, wait, I'm halfway around the block. So it kind of depends on where your audience is and things like that. I personally, that drives me nuts when all of a sudden one show is 5 minutes and one is, now you can have deviations. You can have 20 minutes to a half hour, or, on occasion I will do the one I'm putting out this week is going to be longer because it's an interview. So that's, that's just the way it is. And I'm really trying to cut out stuff. And I'm like, it's good stuff. Like, this is all, we're talking about reviews this week and are they important and things of that. And I'm looking for things to cut. And I'm like, nope, that's good. Nope, that's good. And I was like, all right. And I go back to the old Valerie Geller quote. There is no such thing as too long, only too boring. And I was like, so far I've cut a few things, but I'm like, no, that needs to stay. That's a good point. That needs to stay. So
Rich, does that help, Rich?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I really, really appreciate that. And obviously, as a newbie, it sounds to me like I probably don't need to take on both of those at the same time. I'll just stick to my normal strategy of that 25 to 30 minute range. Yeah. And so the shorts really are an evolution of wanting to post through YouTube. That's interesting.
That would be my guess.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that, guys, so much.
What's your show going to be about?
Well, it's going to be business value added. Basically, I'm a business appraiser. I estimate the value of businesses. I've been doing that for about 28 years. And over the years, when I'm done with my appraisal and the owner knows how much their business is worth, the next question out of their mouth is, well, hey, what can I do to increase the value of my business? So the podcast is going to be a combination of what I've learned, tips and insights that I have, and then also guests that are specialists in particular areas that you can enhance, that'll help enhance the value of your business. So that's basically, that's it. I'm not going with any kind of, I'm just kind of doing this for the love of it. I have no sales funnel. I have no, I have no sponsors. I'm just going to do it. And if somebody, wants a business valuation, then, sure, I'm glad to do it, but I'm really not looking at this as a moneymaker.
We have one right now in the chat room. Gary Stockton's like, hey, I need to talk to this guy. So what's your website? Where can Gary find you?
Oh, gosh. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. It's Fair Value one word, advisors. If you do a search for Fair Value Advisors, easiest way to find it, we're fairvalueadvisors.com.
Nice.
And I'm Rich at fairvalueadvisors.com, and that's with an ORS.
Got it. And
the advisors.
The last question I have to ask is, first of all, thank you so much for listening to the show. What's your favorite thing about it?
Your ability to make it entertaining and educational at the same time, which is a skill I'll never have both of those skills. But I don't know if it has to do with how you break up your content and the personal experiences and how you feed that in, but it's just very once listening, I can't stop. I mean, it's just great. I'm so glad you do it, and it's so educational. And
then now I got to go to the other spectrum. Is there anything that when I start talking about it, you go, ugh? I don't know if you're talking, Rich, but you're muted. Is there anything on the other side? And I've got extra skin on, so is there anything you wish I wouldn't talk about, or something that you just go, "Oh, this episode's not for me"?
No, I mean, so far it's every one of them has been interesting, and you cover specific topics. I haven't really come across anything that that I haven't been interested in. Sometimes. Well, I listen to School of Podcasting with you, and then also the what's the other one that you're on?
I've got a few
with the group.
Podcasters Roundtable.
The Roundtable, yeah. And I know when I listen to the Roundtable, sometimes there's way too much detail on stats and what's going on with Spotify, and for me as someone who's just coming, just starting. All I really want to know is Spotify going to, take my show in terms of, allow listeners to listen on,
right.
Listen to it. But, the some of the banter back and forth about, who's going to be number one. I mean, it's entertaining a little bit, but then I kind of get,
yeah, you and me both,
but it's just, but it's a different, but I also realize, I mean, that's a totally different venue, and that's really more, I mean, you guys are going more hardcore into, the whole, what's going on in the whole industry. Whereas, your show is really geared, I think, more towards, folks like me who are, looking to start a show, or, need education on, how to edit, et cetera, different things. So I know there's different purposes for both shows. So I really can't knock either one of them, really.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on and asking your questions, and you know where to find us if you have more. So thanks so much for
thanks.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
There we go.
When you said things he didn't like, I thought he was going to be like, get rid of that nerd stuff.
I don't know. I think we kind of like the nerd stuff. It's got potential. Man. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only Jim Collison.
Nerd jingle. He's a nerd. He's a nerd.
Nerds! Nerd! Nerd!
Turn to the nerds.
Nerds! Nerds!
This is what Joe Rogan did.
You're not Joe Rogan.
It's time for Jim to nerd out. I don't know, Jim. What do you think? Baba Booey, Baba Howard Stern's penis.
Dave, this is a great question.
Okay, yeah. So.
Oh, super good. I love that. That's super fun. That is super fun.
So, Jim, what is going on with the AverageGuy.tv?
Yeah,
this week.
Yeah, Erin Lawrence is back this week. She's at techgadgetscanada.com. She does a ton of review stuff, and she's just the nicest person on the internet. And so she comes and we spend a little time kind of talking about robot vacuum cleaners and DIY home improvement with home automation stuff, and just a lot of great catching up with her. So I'll be posting that episode a little bit later today, the AverageGuy.tv.
And on the School of Podcasting, for years, I've been saying, reviews, rishmuse. I'm not sure. I need a new word for that. But it's one of those things where and I'm right on this. They don't do anything to help you get found. When I hear somebody say, hey, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, it helps us get found. That makes me throw up in my mouth just a little bit. And so we are talking, though, okay, so it doesn't help you on Apple, but does it help you? And boy, Joe Salsi High from Stacking Benjamins comes on. He took still taking a class on social media. And wow, there's some things that I had not thought of. And I dug a little deeper into this topic. And we're going to bring back what we found. And I was like, so if you like the show, by the way, feel free to go out to, I think, askthepodcastcoach.com/love, I think, maybe. If you got to askthepodcastcoach.com/ you'll see / whatever, apparently, askthepodcastcoach.com. You can leave us a rating and review. It doesn't help us get found, but it does make us feel warm and fuzzy and things of that nature. So that's coming up on the schoolofpodcasting.com. Thanks again so much to the chat room and everybody in Clubhouse. Don't go away. We're it sounds like we're over, but we're not. We're going to do a little post show, and you can stick around and ask more questions if you have them. I really, you know what I've come to the conclusion, Jim? I just need new glasses.
Oh, it's
because I'm really having a hard time reading that. It looks like 39. Nope, 17. So I got 6 seconds I got to kill so that I can then say, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Stick around for some post show.